The LG C1 to the right, the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II to the left. You decide which one is the winner for you, but I'm showing you this to show you how tremendous the LG C1 picture quality got. And this is after my most recent settings that I've made for it to enhance the look of it. As you can clearly see, it is absolutely quantum dot OLED level in some examples, especially now with those flowers. It's just insane. The reason I'm pointing this out is because I did have some requests to reshoot this comparison after my initial video of it. I did get people saying it would be nice to see how the LG C1 does after your latest settings. And that's what we're doing right here, guys. And I mean, it's really incredible for me personally to see this, because like now the C1 looks way better to the right. The Sony Bravia 8 Mark II is just too pale. And it's actually mind-blowing considering that this is a quantum dot OLED, and not in this particular example, but in a lot of examples like now, it's getting edged out by a WOLED. Kind of makes you have to rewrite the whole narrative of WOLED and what its limitations are when Sony's quantum dot OLEDs are hitting so beneath the pale, beneath the boundary of what we expected. It's just, I don't know. I didn't expect it to be this bad for the Sony. Now, for whatever reason, the camera's washing out right here, but on the TV, when I look at it with my naked eye, they look identical. So this is not going to be a like-to-like. Sometimes it just washes out weirdly, or it perceives a washout where there isn't one for the LG. So that's really weird with the camera. WOLED has always been very particularly difficult to record, though. You can see all the depth, though. The clarity is beyond what Sony is offering. I mean, look at that. It's monstrous. It's downright monstrous. Sony has good sharpness and everything, but I mean, it's supposed to, I feel, because it's big kind of like thing. Its big claim is we're Sony, we're lens to living room. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of braggadocious shit over with Sony. So, I mean, I'm not impressed by Sony being a Sony as far as processing. In some instances where it's still a little sharper, but I mean, look at what LG is doing too. I think it's more impressive that an older LG without all this new AI shit, as far as like cognitive processors and all that, is performing like it is. I'm going to go to another example though, because I think this does need to be, I wouldn't say necessarily investigated so much as just observed. So again, the Sony's to the left, the LG's to the right. And so far, I'm going to give it to LG, especially on the reds. Sony's reds are just way too pink. I have no idea why they even look like that. They're just pink. Again, I don't know what the camera's going to show, but Sony overdid it with the color a lot. Like, it's just overzealous. And I didn't increase color to anything crazy to try to exaggerate color. It's just like that. Really, really pink. I can tell you, the more you do these comparisons, the more your eyes will start to open. Like, I never expected an LG from 2021 to beat a quantum dot OLED from any year. I'd have told you this is impossible. And the LG looks more like the quantum dot OLED. It just does. It's actually insane when I look at the differences. I mean, and everything really does look quite beautiful on the LG. Sony, I don't know why, even though I own this TV and everything, it just has not been able to impress me like that. Like, everybody is like, I don't know, they're all up Sony's ass, but I just cannot get behind it. Like, I look at the picture and it just screams subpar to me. But then again, we're talking the price point that I paid for it. You know, even on sale, I paid over $2,400 after taxes. That's a lot of fucking money. Like, back in the day, that was a nice used car, you know what I mean? Like, and now you get a TV, a 55-inch of all things for that. And it's just disproportionate. Like, I don't see where that money is actually benefiting or where you're getting a gain. Like, I'll try to use some more Sony demos to try to see maybe with Sony's content, with Sony's advantage, how it looks. But I have not been impressed, to say the absolute least, with the Sony. Because as I look at the LG, I mean, like, I have it in my head that LG is supposed to be so far beneath Sony when it comes to processing and when it comes to image quality, but I'm just going to throw this out there. If I'm able to do this with the LG C1 with my settings, I know I'm able to do this with everything at least from the C1 up. So the C2, C3, C4, all G5, C5, I can do this as well. And the first TV that really tipped me off that I was able to make the LGs look a lot better was the C5. Because it just had such a beautiful picture. I mean, it was to die for, it really was. And now you get to see that with the LG C1 and against the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II, dubbed the king of TV by all the industry experts and, you know, forum leaders and all that shit. And what does it really mean? It means that basically it's an LG C1. Is that what we're trying to say here? I mean, because look, out of the box is how most of this shit is rated. And that's why I have the biggest protest, because I'm like, dude, if you're rating shit out of the box and you're not actually rating it on every tool at the television's disposal, is it really fair to say that it's a king of TV if you didn't actually see what the pinnacle of picture quality it could produce is? You just went off of a reference standard. You hooked up tools and equipment to do what the reference says, but the reference was created 30 years ago for literally 30-year-old content. It just seems rather silly and kind of stupid to me personally, because I feel like they should be doing their due diligence to at least show us something new. And I don't see where that is happening. And I think Sony's big problem this year is they are extremely blue. I mean, like way too blue in all of the instances where you're supposed to have that subtle green and the cyans. You just don't have that. And even like with the white balance, it's literally an undefeatable blue. You just cannot get away from it. It's overpowering. But then you look over at the LG and you see what LG is doing and you can't help but be impressed. For anybody wondering the color space I'm in on the LG, I believe I'm in the BT601. I'm not entirely 100% sure on that. I'll check it now. But I'm fairly positive it's the BT601, right? It's nothing higher than the 709 for sure. 1113111. Open it up. Yeah, I'm in the BT601. So this is LG's lowest operating color space. And it's doing a damn good job of holding its own next to Sony. And Sony is just, I don't know, man. I need to really try to be experimental with some settings because it has a nice picture, but it's missing something for me. Like, you know, it's missing that extra like level of shock and awe. Now, it does have more detail than the LG. I will give it that for sure, especially on those water droplets on those tomatoes. I did see that. Brightness sometimes can be a bit brighter. It is actually a lot brighter. I did dim it down a bit. I'll pause here. I dimmed it down for parity because if I brighten it up, the Sony will stop looking as impressive as it looks right now. So again, you can't really brighten up the Sony. You have to go into your brightness and really change things, and I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the peak luminance feature. I have it set to medium right now, but you can easily raise it to high. As you see, it does raise up, but it's not crazy substantial. Honestly, it over brightens all your colors. That's what it's doing. It's not, I mean, it gives you better highlights in the brightest portion of the highlights, but it's just overdoing the color. That's the one thing when you go from medium to high, it just, you know what I mean? So I had to balance it out and bring it back to normal, which is why I did it the way that I did. Because if I didn't do it that way, this comparison would have been pretty one-sided, and I'm not really trying to do a one-sided comparison, if you know what I mean. I want it to be fair. And so that's why I'm giving both their best shot. But I mean, whoever thought a WOLED LG C1 could compete like this? I mean, look, left to right. I'll try to reframe it a bit so you can kind of see it a little bit better maybe. I'm taken back that LG has this kind of potential. I mean, I've had this TV for years and I never thought it could be this good. And look at it. Going up against a Quantum Dot OLED and not just holding its own, edging out the Quantum Dot OLED. And a lot of scenes and a lot of examples. And if it doesn't edge it out, it looks like for like. It's actually pretty wild that we're having this conversation. Because years ago, I was the same person telling you that LGs were limited, WOLED can never compete with Quantum Dot OLEDs, and the list goes on. Well, I was wrong. And I'm not any kind of immune to saying that I was wrong about something. But The nice thing about new technology is when I use something like, let's say, a LG, or rather, a Hisense U75QG as a reference monitor to try to pull everything that it does out of the panel and put it on something like an LG C1 to try to mirror that look, I'm able to change and evolve what I was able to do. So new technology is actually pushing forward this older technology by way of me updating my reference point and what I saw at the time when I first made my very first settings for the C1. So that's why we have it, even though it's the same TV, we get newer settings that are improved because there's no such thing as perfection. You can always improve. And I still haven't found the perfect settings because when something is perfect, it ceases to have any room for improvement. And I just don't believe that that's the case. This is something that I will always work towards, is always getting to better picture quality. And just look at the LG C1 comparatively to the Sony. I mean, Sony has this reputation that I genuinely don't understand why they still have it, because when you look at what LG did back in the C1 era, we're not talking C2, we're not talking C3, C4, or even the monstrous C5. We're just talking the C1 level. This is dimmer than a C5, less color than a C5, and it's still holding its own next to a Sony Bravia 8 Mark II. Like, bro, be so for real right now. Like, Sony is taking a piss. And I think I'm the only YouTuber that's actually diligently trying to show this. Not to hurt Sony. Honestly, this video is being recorded on a Sony A7 IV, or A7 Mark IV. So, I mean, I don't have any hatred for Sony. I have disdain for the laziness that they're trying to pass off now as innovation, for sure. Because, I mean, back in the day, I'm like one of those OG Sony fans, okay? Like, I used to love the triluminous backlighting system mixed with quantum dots. That shit produced the most vibrant images anyone had ever seen at the time in 2013. And now in 2025, no one even talks about Sony's LED TVs. They're all shit. Even with quantum dots, even with triluminous, they're just blah. Black levels are crap. Like, Sony, how is Sony the same Sony that had the slim backlight drive and the grid array backlighting system and monsters like the Z9D, but they can't replicate that same monstrous success? They can, they just don't want to because I guess it's expensive and they're lazy. Now, don't get me wrong, in this example, Sony looks beautiful. And I think Sony has the better skin tones in this particular example, by my naked eye and what I'm seeing. No idea what the camera or YouTube will show you, but just a play-by-play. Sony definitely has the better skin tones in this example. So it's like I see glimmers of old Sony within the new Sony bullshit. And I feel like if enough people call Sony out and tell them where they're failing and what they're not doing, I feel like we can really fix Sony. I mean, because look, the skin tones are gorgeous now. Look at that. Beautiful skin tones. Wonderful, fantastic. We have beautiful warmth, quantum dot color. So again, I'm not saying that the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II is the worst TV ever made. I'm saying I miss old Sony. Like, I'm one of those like original fans of what Sony did that made themselves special. And when it's gone, it's kind of like, that's like if you go to like something like Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton or any nice hotel that you've known, or you go to a restaurant like, let's say, even Olive Garden, and back in the day, you know, they'd have things like the Bellini iced teas and they had it tasting all good with the different way that they made it. And through the time that has passed, they got lazy and the formula changed, or they put less ingredients or cheaper ingredients, and now it doesn't taste the same and now you don't like it anymore. That's kind of what Sony is. Sony was a really high-end brand at one point that diluted themselves with water more and more, and their flavor is now cheap and sour. But the name brand is still something that brings people in and makes people clamor to them and go, oh my gosh, it's a Sony. But then Sony, again, through cheap ingredients, or in this case, cheap materials and a lack of genuine effort, has led to Sony declining. Because Sony, I mean, come on, I've seen their genius. They could easily do what they did in 2017 with the Sony X900E. That TV was absolutely legendary for a reason, and it's because of what it had to offer everybody. You're talking absolutely brilliant, ahead of its time black levels, even though we only had full arrays back then. We're talking about absolute exceptional quality of, you know, contrast and three-dimensional objects. And now look at Sony today against an LG C1 WOLED, not even anything new on the market right now. This is literally like the first C1 or C series that they reset And it's like, basically this is a C11 for anybody wondering, you know, but it's just annoying because I look at it and I'm like, you could have done so much better than this, Sony. Like, don't get me wrong, the yellows look beautiful right here. Detail looks good, but is it so much better than the LG C1? And this is going to be on a lot of people's minds because, you know, so many of the people that watch this channel had or have a C1 and they see the picture quality and how beautiful it is. And so when it's holding the testament of time against something that's supposed to be day and night better with cutting edge technology, but cutting edge ain't so cutting edge, you're starting to really like lose the romance behind buying TVs. Because, you know, when you have that, it just feels like, well, what's the point if they're not even going to try anymore? Like, I literally have a better picture on my C1. Like, what's up with that? Again, it's not in every example. The yellows and that diamond look amazing on the Sony right here. And I love the greens. They look absolutely beautiful. I think reds are a little overly brightened. And I think one of the big problems that Sony has this year that they just, and prior years didn't have, is that they are too complacent and too dependent upon their technology of cognitive and AI and all this crap. They're not focusing enough on, you know, precision color mapping or, you know, aggressive points of adjustment to where if something needs to be darker, it should just darken. You know, the first TVs Sony had that had color management systems were able to darken pretty decently. And now they just are broken and weird. And I don't like seeing LG dominate with contrast like this. Look how three-dimensional the bike is. I mean, I say I don't like it. I mean, I own both these TVs. Don't misunderstand this. This isn't like bias. They're both my TVs, fully paid for by me. But at the end of the day, I just say I don't like it because I remember when Sony had that room, that headway, that advantage going into every comparison, and now it's hard to find a win for Sony. You've really got to struggle these days to see where Sony can pull ahead of even a C series, because the C series is every bit as competent. And then that makes you feel like, well, why should I pay literally thousands of dollars more for Sony in some cases? Because the C1, it got to the point where that shit was going for $9.99 for the 55-inch. But if I'm paying like, you know, $9.99 on one end, and then I go to Sony and then I'm paying over $2,400 after taxes, and that's with a sale. I mean, and because it was $2,200, you know, so I ended up paying over $2,400. When you get up to $2,499 on so-called sale, you're over $2,800 that you're paying for the Sony, damn near $3,000 after tax. That's a lot of money. And look at the picture that the C1 is offering, and after taxes, let's say you pay $9.99, you ain't gonna pay more than $1,200-1,300 for the damn thing. You would save a ton of money. And now here's the kicker. This is just at the C1 level. If you look at a C5, the current year, which has an improvement and refinement in color and an Evo panel where it does get brighter and better motion, some of the best motion I've ever seen in my life, especially on an LG product, you're going to win in a way that you just have not on Sony in a very, very long time. And that's where I get really irritated, because I'm like, dude, we are so fucking close to, like, honestly, QD OLED being a bit irrelevant, and it's for no other reason than the most incompetent in the field are picking it up. If LG were to put quantum dots in their TV, they would show us how it's done. We'd see the best color reproduction, we'd see the best motion, the best processing, the best contrast, and honestly, I've been saying this for years now, the best TV of our time. It would be one that everyone and their mother and them should literally ignore every other TV manufacturer and run out and buy that TV that year. Because if LG puts quantum dots and anything that's self-emissive, we win. It's game over for genuinely everybody, because LG's biggest problem is they're doubling and quadrupling down on this WOLED technology. And while, yes, it's great that you can compete with Sony's lack of effort, you still got beaten by the Samsung S95F. And it didn't have to happen that way. You could have beaten them if you would have just used the tech of this time period instead of holding on to something that's been around for 11 years. And that's where I get annoyed with LG. They're kind of like a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of, kind of mindset. And Sony is like, we're Sony, so we don't really have to change or adjust anything. And we can sell the same thing over and over again, just at a higher price. And a bunch of other issues that Sony has mentality-wise that keeps it in the gutter as well. I look at these examples though, like now, And I see Sony with the extra sharpness and the foliage. And I think that's where Sony pulls ahead of LG is foliage detail. So in that regard, it's not like Sony's doing absolutely nothing for picture quality. They do have tremendous detail. I can't tell you that they don't in foliage. I'm being very specific here because in this particular example, that's where the difference is. LG looks, if I pause right here, I don't know if you can see it. Maybe you can zoom in on YouTube. I'll even try to focus a little bit better. If you really zoom in, LG looks very, very soft by example right now. I see none of the detail in the flower. It all looks trash. There's no three-dimensionality at all in the center here. Where over here, I have all the three-dimensionality, all the color, everything. It's brilliant. So that's where the cognitive processor is doing a good job. I'm here to give credit where credit's due, but I feel like there aren't enough of those examples because now the LG's pulling ahead of Sony as far as the detail in that necklace. So like in one scene where it's like LG fell behind, they come right back in the next example and they're like, yeah, okay, that was one example, whatever. And that's where I get a little salty because I feel like Sony could have done better with what they had. Now, Sony does have really good shadow detail. I mean, you can't take that away from them. But I do feel as though Sony, with the way that they've gone about doing things, everything is just about being very, very, very blue. And it's clear when I look at like examples like this and even the white balance compared to this WOLED, the LG has the warmer picture and the more natural, lifelike ambient light. And it's a WOLED. So this Judd Voss white point that Sony has adopted, it really isn't doing Sony any favors. And I've really got to try to be really creative with this Sony. Maybe I can reinvent the wheel with enough time to figure out how to get this shit out of the TV. Because this is what's destroying the picture quality. Now, pause right here. I'd be a fool if I didn't tell you this. The amount of contrast coming off of the Sony right now is blowing that out of the water. The Sony is absolutely capable of those moments where, again, with foliage, especially like plants, any kind of plant, fruit, vegetables, don't matter, where, look, the detail is just so high and so crystal clear and tack sharp and three-dimensional is destroying anything LG can produce. So from that point of processing, Sony is still maintaining their good name, but that can't be the only thing that they're doing, you know? Now I get it. They say they have Triluminous Max and a bunch of other shit, you know. They have all these terminologies and all this jargon and all these things that they swear up and down is like the end all to be all, like bee's knees. But when you look at like all of these real examples too, though, you kind of see like where it's not really what you thought a Sony was supposed to be like. Because me personally, I thought the Sony and the LG were supposed to be like so vastly different. LG pulling ahead in contrast right now. And it shouldn't, in my opinion, again, it's just an opinion. It shouldn't happen like that. I don't think there should be anything the LG should be winning against a $3,000 Sony. Like, what the fuck? This wasn't, like, the LG was never designed to be a $3,000 model, and it's kind of right there with the Sony, like, yeah, okay, and in this example with the sky, LG has far deeper color than what Sony's reproducing. And this scene, they're literally a tie. They look exactly identical. I can't find an advantage for either, outside of maybe LG with a bit more contrast. And therein lies the problem. This is a Sony demo made to make Sony TVs look good. But look at the WOLED, richer color right there in this example too. And again, WOLED doesn't have quantum dots. That's supposed to matter. And this is showing that it clearly doesn't though. Like you genuinely don't need quantum dots to have an exceptional picture. And LG's kind of showing that with great authority. And I think when something like that happens, you've got to kind of be embarrassed if you're Sony and you've allowed that to happen, because it's like, how on your demos, I'm playing all Sony's demos right here. This is where Sony's supposed to look the best and shine the most. But then you look over and LG has color variants that Sony doesn't have. Or if they don't, they look identical. That's not supposed to happen. Now, yeah, they juiced up the red this year and red is absolutely crazy, but I feel like red is a little overdone. Like, they could have toned red down for sure and not made it as punchy, I would say. Because it just is, again, it's just too aggressive. And when you have something this aggressive constantly, it's just a buzzkill, because you are always reaching for the remote to try to dial it down to normal, and normal doesn't exist on the TV, and you're like, well, fuck it then. Now, contrast in this example is better on the Sony. I can give them that. But then in this example, it's good on the LG too. Right there, way above what Sony's doing three-dimensionally. This example goes to the LG. I mean, and again, when you look at this back as I'm talking and you're watching the YouTube video, you're going to be like, this is impossible. How is an LG C1, say it again, C1, not a C5, right? We're like 5 models removed, okay? To give you an idea of the difference in time that has passed, is LG producing an image that is every bit as competent as a Sony Bravia 8 Mark II, but yet the LG C1 never got any awards for being a king of TV. Like, I mean, hypothetically speaking, if it can do everything that the so-called king of TV can do, why is the LG C1 not called a king of TV? Why is it just called one of the best TVs people have reviewed, or, oh, it's such a great TV, but not a king of TV? It's literally doing everything the Sony is doing, more or less. Some processing differences like sharpness and foliage, like I told you and showed you. But I mean, the overall impact is identical. I mean, look at this. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. They look identical. LG now has more contrast by a lot. Now they're evening out. But I mean, like, they go back and forth too. I mean, it gets to a point where it's kind of hard to justify saying that anything is beneath Sony. And I've seen it in the comments too, where people will get into these heated debates. I mean, heated. You'd think they're going to go to blows or fly out to each other's states and just start fighting each other over literally saying that LG is absolutely better than Sony, or Sony isn't king, or whatever. But when you look at real comparisons like this, like, it doesn't lie, folks. Like, you can't pull out more contrast. You can't make something look like more than what it is, you know? I'll say the reds on the Sony, again, they look better in this example, but LG's reds actually look really good, which usually is hard to produce on LG. From a contrast perspective, I like the way the water looks in that example on the Sony, but the sky looks more natural on the LG here. So as far as accuracy, I say LG has an edge as far as reproduction of color. Sony has better clarity and contrast in this example. And I'm trying to be as thorough as I possibly can and go through as many of this as, examples of this as I can, so that you can clearly see that something from ages ago that's just a WOLED is on Sony's level. And I can't make it do that without it having the ability to do that. The same way I can't make Sony not win if Sony didn't win. I mean, but the thing that bugs me is, again, if you take it out of the box and you watch these comparisons out of the box, as I've shown in quite literally numerous examples, then you'll be like, okay, well, now I see that Sony is just not, it's not up to task, or it doesn't look great with your settings comparatively to something else with your settings, but maybe it's just the way you set up the TVs, because out of the box they look identical. But they're both calibrated to the same exact reference standard. And the reference standard is make it look like a CRT. And Sony's better at looking like a CRT because that's what it was programmed to do, so it could win on every test bench and win numbers. But if you get away from trying to win numbers and you just want to have a great picture, there are things you have to do. Now look, in this example, Sony has the better dog in some scenes, and they have better contrast in some examples as well. Grass by far looks a lot better. But I mean, talk about impact, talk about color, talk about reproduction of certain things and what you feel when you look at the scene. I mean, yeah, Sony pulls ahead for sure in this regard on this particular demo, but I mean, by how much? Is it enough that you, with a C1 right now today, already paid off of whatever size, whether 65 or whatever it is, 55, doesn't matter. And, is it enough that you'd want to rebuy a whole TV all over again? I don't know that it'd be worth that. I mean, I don't know. See, I buy TVs all the time because I'm a TV reviewer and I need stuff to compare to the new stuff and to show you guys things. But in my personal life, I use a Samsung S95D. It's the only TV I use. I don't even swap out with all of these other TVs, if I'm being very honest with you. I have never once tried to swap my S95D for the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II. I've considered the S95F. I'm still considering and debating doing that because that's it's a pretty damn good TV, but that's about it. I mean, everything else hasn't really, you know what I mean, hasn't moved me to do that. Now, in this demo, for sure, Sony has some crazy contrast, and I'm loving it. It looks really good in this example. Color of grass is kind of shit. I'm really not impressed with what they're doing. And I think that's something to consider as well. Like, sometimes you are just not going to be feeling what they have for color paletry. And this definitely is one of those examples, because as I look at it, I'm like, I don't know what the grass is all about. Like, you'll see it when we get to the slide. Look how blue it looks on the Sony. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, their green is such a problem color this year that I don't understand it. Green, problem color on Sony. Purple, problem color on Sony. And the reds are way too damn bright. They need to tone that down with a patch or something. But again, this is, I think, the other problem with not listening to consumers or people who actually paid for your product, especially if they have expertise and professional knowledge like myself and could tell you how to fix what's wrong to make better products. You know, when you get on that high horse of only listening to the Vincent T.O.'s who tell you you're perfect, I think you kind of run the way of staying stagnant and getting beaten by something like, oh, I don't know, a Hisense. Because while nobody in the professional space is taking Hisense seriously like they should, the rest of us are. We're paying attention, right? We're not, like, dumb. We know, like, if there's something that's in the same ballpark price-wise and we can afford it, we're going to look. And no matter how many people say it's unfair to do those kinds of comparisons or that you shouldn't do that, we're all going to look, right? And I think that's the thing that a lot of these manufacturers don't realize. Like, if you're not up to task, you're not up to task, and we're going to call you on that. And you got to call it. And again, look how identical they look. Contrast right now, better on the C1. And this particular example, they are identical. Red's better on the Sony. Clarity better on the Sony, for sure, in this example. But contrast impact about the same. Warmer tones on the LG, which should be impossible because it's a WOLED. Motion capabilities, way better on the LG. Very smooth. Everything has natural motion blur where there's a lot more judder on the Sony. Jittery, I would say, not necessarily judder. Just little micro stutters and jitters. Pretty irritating. That don't exist on the LG. Contrast, superior on the Sony in this example. LG still has really good contrast, but Sony's on another level with that. They look identical here. Sony's just brighter. LG has superior skin tones in this example by a mile, like by a massive mile lead. I mean, it gets to a point where you kind of are starting to see what I'm talking about, though. Like, there isn't really anything that Sony is doing that's so special that warrants the price. I think I would be cool with where Sony's at if it was the same price of something like a C1, because I feel like that's all they're really providing picture quality wise, because again, you're seeing a C1 next to it, which is why I'm doing it this way as well, because I want you to really see that I am not making this up. I'm not trying to make my LG C1 look like a superhero. You can't even buy the LG C1 anymore. Okay, if I was smart money and I was really trying to hustle you, I would just tell you, buy the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II. My settings have made it look better than any other TV you ever own. The LG C1 that you have right now, it's time to upgrade, throw it away, and just buy the new Sony because I can make money off of my settings. No. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you, even if you can't buy an LG C1, it's still the better picture, and Sony needs to innovate. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm telling you. Now, ultimately, both of these TVs have my settings on them, so either way, you're going to benefit, regardless of if you're an existing customer or if you're somebody who buys, brand new TVs. I mean, look at the depth on that LG, though. That fan example, I got to run that back. That was fucking impressive. That really caught my eye. I'm not going to lie. As I'm just sitting here talking about what I'm seeing, like that, look at those fans on the LG is so three-dimensional. Crazy. I don't know. I think we got to adjust and address the way we've gone about this whole quantum dot versus, WOLED conversation, because I think in the right hands, WOLED can be every bit as capable as quantum dots in some instances, and I mean, I'm definitely seeing that. And it couldn't be more clear because I'm looking at a quantum dot OLED right next to a WOLED. And honestly, I'm equally as impressed with the WOLED as I am with the quantum dot OLED because it has better colors in certain examples and contrast sometimes. Sony looks better, superior right here in this example. I'm not talking about this example, but just others. But that's the point too, though. Like now, like the WOLED color is tremendous. So much better than Sony. Contrast too, in this particular example, I don't know, man. This is one of those things that gets annoying for me because I just wish that they would be consistent. Like, if you have cutting edge tech, why would you fuck it up by, like, I don't know, giving subpar results? That's one of those things that I would say, maybe a lot of people won't agree with that or maybe have something to say, but I'm going to call it here because I'll probably be here all day if I don't. I have so much I would love to show between the C1 and the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II. So if this is something you're interested in and just seeing how these two compare with certain things, the best thing to do is give feedback, get people to actually watch the series that we'll do on it, and I'll keep it going and show you, again, how strong LG OLEDs really are, if that's something you want to see. If not, that's cool too. We could just have this really long video as a standalone too, but I don't know. This was really impressive, and I think for a lot of people this should be eye-opening. But let me know what you guys thought about it. I think both are great TVs. If I had to pick a winner of this comparison, I would genuinely, honestly say that they are a tie. And the reason I would say that is because the contrast and color output, 9 times out of 10, like now, is identical. Sometimes the contrast, like now, better on the LG. So I can't really say that Sony is just slam dunk winner. That would be a lie, and I'm not going to do that. But that being said, though, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty. LG and WOLED does tie with Sony's version of Quantum Dot OLED. And if you didn't hear it anywhere, you heard it here first. Until the next video, I'll see you guys later.